They can act like spoiled brats, so we often think, oh, maybe they just need some growing up. But it's not really that they're not grown up. It's that when it serves them to be a spoiled brat and to act that way and throw a tantrum, they're going to do it without any self-respect or respect for you.
When you're in an abusive relationship, I think you spend an unbelievable amount of time being confused. And I have always felt like it's on purpose. So I really want to welcome Dr. Peter Salerno, psychotherapist and author of 2 incredible books, one of which I want to kind of bring up today, which is Traumatic Cognitive Dissonance. But the other one, which was the first that I read, was The Nature and Nurture of Narcissism. Both of those books were just unbelievably eye-opening. And the reason I want to focus on the one about cognitive dissonance is because that's the confusion, right? That's what makes this so hard to get out of these relationships. Tell me what led you to actually coin that term traumatic cognitive dissonance. What's different from regular cognitive dissonance to you?
To your point, what you just mentioned, I'm just referring to the sort of dissonance, we'll say traumatic, because it's not just like an internal clash based on something, benign, or even the discomfort of it isn't necessarily related to something that originates in ourselves. It manifests as a result of being intentionally manipulated, coerced, and sort of messed with psychologically by somebody whose intentions are to create the perception in you that you're confused when actually you're not confused, right? It's not a confusion that's originating inside of you. So I feel like that's a bit more of a traumatic internal clash because you're essentially developing contradictory beliefs, not because you don't have the ability to understand what's going on, because that ability is being compromised by somebody screwing with you, essentially.
So it's interesting because I don't know, as a coach from where I sit, this constant, he can't be doing it on purpose. They're not really trying to confuse me, right? And in my experience, both my personal experience and my professional experience, it is on purpose. That's the goal. Confusion serves a real purpose here. So the manipulation and that sort of mixed message, the hot, the cold, he loves me and he cheats on me, or I realize she as well. Mm-hmm. It's manufactured, right? This confusion is something that is intentional.
I think 100%. I think there are people who exist, whether we want to believe it or not, because it affects our preferred idea of what human beings are all about. But I believe there are people out there who have a predatory nature, and they enter into relationships specifically for the purpose of intentionally gaining an advantage over someone. And the best way to gain an advantage over someone is to get them to question their reality and sort of mess with them in a way where they are not completely sure what's going on. They also don't have any evidence to prove it because it's invisible. But yeah, I mean, there's an intentionality to this for sure.
I think that's one of the hardest parts, though, to really believe. When I think back to my own experience, even on purpose, it just feels like, and what I hear often is that this person isn't smart enough. I don't know if you hear that even in your work, my partner's not smart enough to be this manipulative or this strategic. And I think for me, I see it as more instinctual. Is that how you see it?
100%. First of all, there really is no correlation between intelligence and manipulation. You don't have to be intelligent to be a good manipulator. That's not really where it stems from. It's not about being like a master manipulator or like a mad genius. It's really more about, I'm going to throw a bunch of stuff out and see what sticks, So a lot of it is they're almost like conducting these social experiments with your mind and heart as they go along. It's not always premeditated in the sense that the manipulation is premeditated, but the strategy is sometimes spur of the moment. Like, what can I get away with here? What can I try? And I've even seen this in clinical practice with some clients who are highly manipulative. Like, they're going to try to lead me down a track where let me see what I can say to get the response that I want. I would say that certain people across the board are doing this with everybody, from the cashier at the grocery store to the person at the bank to their significant other. It's almost like their way, like you said, it's this instinctual way of being. And it's in their nature to be very manipulative and coercive. And it's 100% intentional because it seems to work for them.
Yeah. Well, so something I hear a lot too is, why do they all have the same playbook? If I make a video and do a skit or something and show what someone says, often, not always, but I'm using personal experiences and people are like, oh my God, that's my person. That happened to me. He said the same thing. They said the same thing. There's a joke, it's the narcissist university. They all go to the same university and they learn how to do this. But what you're describing is sort of this social test, the strategy. I'm going to say this and see if it gets me that reaction. So do you think that they're using life experiences even over multiple relationships and it's like they know that certain things work? Or do they study you to manipulate you?
Yeah, I think it's both. I think the idea that it's like they've all attended the same university or have the same education or mindset is a great way to also validate the argument that I make a lot, which is that this has to do with these innate traits and they're universal traits. The people who are problematic seem to have the same or similar like levels of these pathological traits that happen to be antagonistic, manipulative, coercive, right? Like this need for controlling people and getting them to do what you want. So I think it's a way of being for them. It's sort of like a lot of people, the way of being for a lot of people is how can I be the most generous, kind, altruistic? There's other people out there that are like, how can I be conniving and cunning and manipulative enough to get what I want without necessarily needing to be accountable for it? So to them, it is a playbook. And I think they see relationships often as a game too. It's like a win-lose. It's not a, how do I connect best with this person, but what do I get from it? And then how can I get what I want from it?
Yeah. It's so exploitative, right? When you are in this relationship thinking, what can I get from this relationship? Or combined or worse, I deserve to get from this relationship and I don't have to give. I always feel like reciprocity is just chucked right out the window. It's not about that at all. And yet they're nice sometimes. And I really like that's the piece that I think is so confusing is that we think that that contrast means they're nice sometimes and they're mean sometimes. So it's from trauma and it's their mom was mean or whatever. We don't actually see it as a strategy, especially if we're seeing it as something like they're not smart enough, which arguably some are. But again, it's not about intelligence, no more than why we stay. It has to do with our own intelligence. I think there's a lot more going on here. But the piece that is, I think, the hardest to believe is that the contrast in their behaviors is not an accident. People see this as you're good and so you do bad things, as opposed to you're a bad person who's pretending to be kind. It's like too hard to hold that belief. What makes that so hard for people, do you think?
Yeah, I was going to ask you the same question. I think what I know about like kind of what we're taught about human beings is if somebody is being manipulative or if they're harming someone, it's coming from a place of defense, like they're protecting something in themselves. There's a vulnerability or an insecurity that needs to be masked or, not dealt with. And so it's like a lashing out because of a reaction or a response because they're feeling threatened. And I think that we're taught that at an early age. I think that we're taught that in the institutions we attend, whether it's school, definitely psychology. Psychology operates off the premise that people only do things because, they feel like they're backed into a corner or they're threatened or they're compensating. It's not true, but that's the narrative we've been fed since we were little. And then I know other institutions, like if you're raised in a religious institution, where there's a certain, it's like giving everyone the benefit of the doubt. Everyone's basically good. They're wayward because something bad happened and you can steer them in the right direction. I think there's all kinds of associations made with it. Like it's coming from this place of defensiveness or hurt. There's just not a lot of evidence to really back that up.
Yeah, which I know is very controversial, even though facts should not be controversial. But I know that it's sort of not everybody knows that, which, read The Nature and Nurture of Narcissism. It's life changing to read that research, just for those that have not already read that book. But I think, you're really making me realize, especially as a parent, I've got little children, and you think about what we teach children in the schoolyard is like if somebody's mean to you, not all parents teach this, of course, but if somebody's mean to you, maybe they have something hard going on at home, respond with kindness or at least leave them alone and just, feel something for them. And I know we're probably trying to create empathy, but also like, no, there's people who will just hurt you for no reason, unprovoked. And I know for me, I got myself to a place where I was like, well, that's narcissists or that's people with cluster B or, disordered. You can kind of almost understand, hey, their brains work differently. Say what you want. What about when it's not someone who is pathological, somebody who's not disordered? Are they still creating the confusion on purpose? And does that come from trauma?
I think there's people who are not disordered who can create confusion on purpose. I don't think it's because they're traumatized. I would appreciate if people could start seeing trauma as like a risk factor that exacerbates something that's already there, rather than it being like the end all be all cause of anything that's going wrong. So for example, like a bully on the playground, or someone who takes someone's cookie from their lunch every day, or someone who takes lunch money, they're not blindly going into that and engaging because they have some deep-seated pain and they just need to express it in that way. I mean, that's kind of silly to think that everybody who tries to gain an advantage over someone, even children, that they're really just like wounded, or they don't know better, or they're operating completely unconsciously, or they're having trouble at home. I know that teachers and nurses and people who interact with children on a daily basis, I don't think any of them truly believe that across the board, but we're almost expected to give that narrative. Well, you don't know what's going on at home with them, or, well, they don't have as much money as you, so that's why they need to steal your lunch. It's like,
You're making excuses.
making excuses. Yeah.
Yeah. You know the expression hurt people hurt people?
I sure do.
God. I
I don't
actually
like.
made a video on that once. I hate it. Oh
Yeah.
my God,
Yeah.
do I hate that phrase. It made sense to me my whole life, and now I'm like, no, actually, absolutely no. I reject that notion completely because I've been hurt and I don't actively choose to hurt people. So many
Right.
people who are traumatized, childhood trauma, adult trauma, we are not hurting people. So when we look at it as abusiveness is a choice.
Right.
I mean, I have a intentional habit of making things simple, sometimes maybe even bordering oversimplified. But I think that in some contexts, it's like, yes, there's factors and risk factors, as you said, and environment plays a role and all these things. But fundamentally, like you're choosing to be abusive. That's just, you can choose to not be horrendous if you wanted to, but it
Yes.
serves you to not stop.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think people are trying their best to find a reason, and like the hurt people reason is, it's trying to like make sense of how somebody could get to the point where they mistreat someone so badly. And there are associations between some people who are mistreated and then they go on to mistreat people. There's also a lot of other reasons for why that might be the case. It's not necessarily just that it's because they were hurt. Because like you said, there are so many exceptions to that rule. I know people who have been absolutely brutalized in their childhood and neglected with no support system whatsoever. And they are stable people who are kind and generous and not abusive, you know? And
Like it's
it's
that
not that,
simple.
well, it's not to say that like their childhood didn't inform their view of the world, but they are choosing not to be abusive. So we can't just say that it's a direct consequence and then there's nothing you can do about it. I think that's an excuse that's just not valid.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I think that abusive people tend to, like, hey, that's who I am. I didn't learn better, but it becomes an excuse. I didn't know better. Since when is that an excuse? I mean, to be fair, you talk about even like the criminal justice system. You can't go like, well, I didn't know that I had to pay my taxes or I didn't know that I had to file it in a certain way. It's like, no, you're an adult. You needed to know that. You can't just say I didn't realize that it would hurt someone, or you have to function in the world
Yeah.
from the right kind of place.
It's like they see, but they just disagree. I know. I mean, everyone has to pay their taxes, but they go, but I don't because I disagree. It's some conspiracy. We're being screwed. Well, okay, let's say that there's some tiny truth to that. Yeah, there's an advantage to be gained for the taxes that we have to pay. Someone's benefiting from it. But there's a lot of someone's benefiting from. We have to stop at red lights so we don't cause accidents. Are we going to not stop because someone's benefiting from that signal? Like it's sort of like now we're talking about we have to collaborate and cooperate to make things run smoothly, and then there's people who just say no, I actually don't have to do that,
That's
and
entitled.
that's an intention. Yeah, it's entitlement. It's intentional resistance. It's not because they're so wounded inside that they just don't know better and they don't know how to follow the rules.
That hot and cold, though, they're good and they're bad. I think what is tricky and what gets people is people are not one thing, right? I don't think we put people into like you are all good and you are all bad. That's not a category or not something I've ever thought about. It's also a very black and white way of thinking, which is not typical. But it's not that they are all one thing, but it's can these two things coexist? Two things can be true at one time, but not two completely opposing things. So someone isn't repetitiously cheating on you and they love you or they respect you and they really want you to stay. They really love you so much, but they're calling you names and treating you like garbage. I always think that the part that really gets me is you say, that hurts me. They see tears coming from your eyeballs. How do they not know that they're hurting you? And it almost leads me into like, they have cognitive empathy, right? I mean, I'm talking about narcissists, but they have cognitive empathy at the very least, do they not?
Yeah. Some understand what's going on, even if they don't necessarily have an emotional attachment to it, where they can identify in a meaningful or sincere emotional way. But they certainly do. I think this is an important discussion because, well, and even in your personal experience, I guess I could ask you. I mean, I imagine there were times when you thought there was a sincerity there, and then sort of like after that, it contradicted, other behaviors contradicted that sincerity. I mean, did you?
I experienced that constantly. Like, I mean, I guess we all do, but the hot and the cold, it was like he wanted me to trust him and then behaved in a way that was untrustworthy. Or he would make excuses all the time, but then say he was trying. And it didn't make sense to me because that's not how I see trying. But then it became sort of semantics of like, well, just because you don't think I'm trying, but like trying would look different and trying would look like improvement. And then that's the catch though. It did look like improvement sometimes. So it was the hot and the cold, it sucked me in every time. I literally couldn't make sense of it. And it was brutal. I don't wish this kind of confusion on my worst enemy, in all honesty. I think the destabilizing kind of feeling of you never really know. And I think what I even see, and certainly what I felt, was like, I know, I do know. Do I? I think. It shifts from day to day. You're so clear, and then suddenly you're not clear. I had these really big moments of like, no, this is bad. I have to admit, I never saw it as abuse when I was in it, but I was like, this is bad. I need to go. This person is never going to change. I would look at myself in the mirror, sort of dead face, like, leave. You need to leave. Stop this. Stop being stupid. You need to make a different decision, Lisa. Let's do this. Let's go. Trying to like rally myself. But then like he comes home and he's in a good mood. And I almost wonder, is his mood really a good mood? Or did he come home and sense that I was like fed up or done or just not in a good mood myself and sort of felt like I need to turn on the charm. I need to get something. I need to, be strategic. I've been horrible lately, so now I need to be good for a few days, or I want something. I want to do something. So I need to be good leading up to that so that I can throw it in her face that we haven't fought in a week or something. That hot and cold, I didn't see it as intentional. And when you're on the other side of it, it's like, this is intentional.
I'd like to ask you, like, so when you're in the mirror saying, like, you know what's going on, you have to leave or whatever, and then he comes home in a good mood, what happens next? What happens to that sort of pep talk that you gave yourself? Did it disappear altogether? Yeah.
Gone, like in the
Mhm.
snap of a finger, in looking at him. It's funny, actually. There's a question that comes up in my mind sometimes of like, how do you know that you're walking on eggshells? How are you assessing what kind of mood this person is in? Because we're all sort of managing that. And for me, if he came home, I would know instantly. There was just a look on his face. Maybe it was his eyes. There was something. And in the moment that I recognized a good mood, everything was like, and I think now I'm going to call it relief, maybe even dopamine, but it was a moment of like, okay, everything's going to be okay today because he's fine. But if it was a mood or there was sarcasm or anger, it was like, oh my God, how long is this going to last? But it was interesting how quickly I would just like eat up a good mood and like, oh, everything's good again. I was trauma bonded. I didn't know that at the time, but it's like, that's the addiction. That's the like, oh, the sigh of relief that they're actually good. But I don't know, like what led me, you think, to do you think this is clinically accurate, what I'm saying?
No, totally. But I think because they live in this dichotomous world where something is either all good or all bad, we sort of have to follow along with that. So we lose the gray area too. So kind of what you're describing is you're in the mirror, it's concrete, you're pretty like definitively, I got to make a change here. And then the extreme, it's like you get the pendulum swings when he comes home and you see the look on his face or whatever. There really is no gray area or stopping points for you. It's like it's this all or nothing world because everything has to be perfect for them or you're the worst person in the world to them. So it's almost like your nervous system gets accustomed to being the all good or all bad object. And I think that's why your mind and body skip the steps of, well, wait, yeah, true, he is in a better mood today. But remember the conversation we were just having with ourselves in the mirror, you almost skip the step and you lose it altogether, which I think is why the intensity of both is just so unfair. And that intensity is coerced as far as I'm concerned. I mean, if they can keep you in that ambiguity, they got you.
They got you. And that's like, it's on purpose. It's on purpose. They're doing it because it serves them. That confusion is so intense that you are living in this dual reality. And I don't know, I even feel like, we talk about cognitive dissonance and they're good, they're bad, and how do you hold on to the reality? But like when you're in it, you feel so convicted in one direction that you know it's bad, you know you need to leave, and then suddenly you feel all this relief. You feel like you love them and you hate them. You know you need to leave, but you can't. You feel guilty. Perfect conditions for creating a trauma bond. And I would say that again, I don't think that they know that they're creating a trauma bond. I would highly doubt almost any of them have that language. Maybe now a bit because of social media, but they don't really have that language. But do they know they're creating an attachment? And that every time you try to leave, they say just the right thing. It's like, ask yourself how they could possibly know to say the right thing if they didn't know how this works and just drag you back in by your feet. You've got one foot out the door, one piece of your heart out the door. It's hard. I think that the guilt that they use and certainly the hope that we have, they really push that so much. That's a huge part of trauma bonding, and the confusion. You hope that they'll change. Hope is meaningless in this context, I think.
You said something I wanted to touch on real quick. I think we're also trying to resolve our cognitive dissonance in the process of manipulation. So we're landing on that we want it to work in the favor of it's going to work. So we're quick to, get coerced into resolving it temporarily when something good goes on, So it's not just a struggle where we're confused, we're also trying to resolve that confusion as best we can, simultaneously thinking there's no way they're doing this on purpose all the time, I think that's what confuses people too. And I've heard a lot of people say, well, there's times when I've been manipulated or manipulative and it wasn't intentional. I was really coming from a place of defense. It's like, okay, well, we're not saying that every human being who manipulates all the time is intentional. That's not what we're saying. We're saying there's a percentage of the population and the people who are trauma bonded with them, it's likely that those people are intentionally manipulating. So we got to remember too, we're not talking about human beings and the human condition. We're talking about a certain type of person who may or may not be disordered and who is going into these interactions with the intention of they're the like puppet master and they're pulling your strings. And that's the way the dynamic works. That's what works for them. And that's really what they are benefiting from. It's not a level playing field.
It isn't. But I think, when I know for me, my worldview is not that like people are manipulative and you need to watch out for people. I'm not paranoid. I don't think the worst of people. And yet disordered people, and in my view, also just abusive people, they do see the world that way. It's like, it's a game. You said it's a game. When I say that, I see a lot of people's eyes like, shock, because it's not a game. It's your life. And yet it's a game, and it is about winning and losing. Although I find this whole winning and losing thing, a narcissist obviously wants to win and they want you to lose. But in my view, they want you to lose more than they want to win. So they will happily burn everything to the ground. They'll take everybody down, including themselves, as long as you lose. Maybe not every single one, but often. That was certainly my situation. But I see that a lot. Like they'll burn everything to the ground, and that's confusing. You're destroying us. You're destroying our relationship. You're destroying me, but you love me. Like there was one really significant conversation where I remember screaming at him, like, I feel like I have Stockholm syndrome or something. This is crazy. I never heard of the word trauma bond. And he laughed in my face because it was like, oh, what, I'm holding you captive? Listen, it felt like it. I know we have free will, but it didn't feel like that. I have never been more confused in my life. But on the other side of it, this is so clear to me. I could never unsee how obviously intentional this is. But I hope I never forget what it was like to be that confused, because I think it helps me help people to remember that distinct feeling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell me what your thoughts are on this whole concept that they're just emotionally immature, right? So sometimes they have good moments, sometimes they have bad moments. It's just a lack of emotional maturity. They just need to learn. What do you think?
I don't think that we can reduce this type of abuse to somebody who's just emotionally immature, because being emotionally immature doesn't mean that you're abusive. There's a lot of people who need some emotional stability, or they need to develop some emotional muscle, let's say, and they're very kind people. So I don't think that that's a conversation where we can just reduce, if they just got some emotional maturity, they would all of a sudden stop being abusive, because we're talking about like tendencies and propensities and even desire. You know, does it seem like they're being bratty children who don't have any emotional maturity at times? Absolutely. But I think it's much more complex than that. It's kind of like the way I see it is like you could be a very intelligent, emotionally mature person, and then you have a drug problem. And when you're under the influence of a drug, your personality is certainly affected by it. And you can behave in some pretty ridiculous, contradictory, immature ways because your cognitive functioning is compromised under that substance. And trying to reason with someone in that state isn't going to work. You have to kind of wait till they clean up and sober up before the maturity comes back. I kind of see these personalities as being that way, but they're not under the influence of anything. I mean, they're under the influence of their own operating system, but there's a lot more to that operating system than just emotion. I mean, they're unwilling to work on not just their emotion, their behavior, their perception, their belief system. I mean, there's just so many more things involved than just feelings and emotions in these types of people. So I don't think it's enough to say they're just emotionally immature. Some of them actually can be very mature in certain contexts, if it benefits them, whether if it's benefiting them in work or in the public, they all of a sudden develop this robust emotional maturity. So I don't think that's enough it's part of it, but it's not enough of the conversation.
I feel like, social media, 60-second videos, I feel like also it kind of contributes to just taking these little snippets because I hear people who are narcissistic get compared a lot to children. Oh, they have the emotional intelligence of a 5-year-old or whatever. That's too simple. And as somebody who likes to oversimplify things, that's too far, in my opinion, because it's not just that. I think that their ability to be, like emotionally immature or appear that way when it benefits them tells you that that's not what it actually is because it's manipulation. Somebody who knows how to turn it on and off, if trauma was really the thing, if emotional immaturity was the thing, or they really didn't know any better, I actually think it would be a lot more consistent. I think the fact that they're not screaming at you at the gas station or the grocery store, that it always seems to be that you're alone when the worst of the abuse happens and that they care about what other people think. They're always doing that image management piece. They know they don't care when it bothers you, and why they suck you back, why they're good sometimes is because the cycle requires it. In order to stay in an abusive relationship, there has to be something to hold on to. That's the good times.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just to your point of when they can turn it on and off. I mean, one that actually, that's evidence that there is an element of self-control there, right? And so it's not just an across the board emotional maturity. I think they can orchestrate it in pretty crafty ways and be in control of it enough when it suits them. I think a lot of people associate emotional immaturity with people who are dramatic. I mean, disordered people are certainly dramatic, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're stunted in a 5-year-old state. They can act like spoiled brats. So we often think, oh, maybe they just need some growing up. But it's not really that they're not grown up. It's that when it serves them to be a spoiled brat and to act that way and throw a tantrum, they're going to do it without any self-respect or respect for you. And then when it serves them to be, this really sophisticated, intellectual, to get that sort of impression across, they're going to get in touch with that too. So again, speaking to your point that this seems pretty intentional.
It really does. That switch that they can flip on and off once you see it. And I really hope that even people listening to this, like when you see it, don't let that go. Hold on to that visual that this is sometimes they know and sometimes they don't. Like that's not how you can't understand something and then not understand the very same thing the next day. They know what they're doing. You've communicated it. And I think also at the end of the day, none of this even matters because even if they were traumatized and that was the cause of it, are they willing to change? Are they willing to be different? Are they collaborative in any capacity? And it's usually no, right? And again, it benefits them. That's the piece because we don't think like that. I don't know about you, but I don't think like, ooh, what can I get from people? I just live my life trying to be a good person. These people are trying to take from you. So they have a benefit just being controlling, like, I don't know. A question I get asked a lot is why aren't they just nice? Like, wouldn't it just be easier to be nice? And I mean, like, no, not if you're a narcissist, not if you're disordered, but even your average abuser. Right? Like, no, that's not easier to not get what they want.
I think it's hard for people to wrap their minds around what we've collectively determined to be the way things work. They have a different lens. It's a distorted lens. They don't see that as convenient or beneficial to them because what that requires is that they're equal with everyone else. And part of the pathology is they don't believe anyone is their equal. And going back to the trauma thing, again, it could be a risk factor to exacerbate things, but I've sat with thousands of trauma survivors who are just the kindest, sweetest people. They make no excuses for themselves. They're responsible. And the trauma is something they want to change. They don't want to feel that way. So they work really hard to feel better. And there's not that same motivation in the people that we're describing right now. You said something earlier that's really important. They will burn their own lives down to be right before they give in, which just shows that this has much more to do with, I mean, they'll throw themselves under the bus, light a fire, if it means being right. And being right's more important than the truth. Being right's more important than resolution. That's a problem. And there's an intentionality to that. They're not willing to give up. It's not even necessarily that they don't know when to give up. It's like, I will not.
That's the key though, right? Like, it's not that they don't know, it's that they don't care. Being right is the only thing that matters. They're like blinded by that need, and we want to figure it out. And what could make them stop being manipulative? I mean, a choice. Can you imagine? It's just choosing to not be horrible and manipulative. That expression, when your words don't match your actions, it's manipulation. They know that they're saying something opposite to their actions. I love you and I'm cheating on you, or I love you and I continue to cheat or call you names. Like, it doesn't make sense. And I always say, if you were to flip it and you treat them how they treat you, that's how you know they know, because they would flip out. They don't deserve to be treated that way. You deserve to be treated that way. So it's manipulation, and all of that leads to confusion. So it's really like holding on to reality. Now, this is actually something that you and I talk a lot about in our group coaching program, the Trauma Bond Recovery group coaching that we host. And we'll definitely, all of this, healing from this kind of horrible, abusive, pathological relationship and trauma bonds near San Diego in Dana Point, California in October. I'm so excited for Unbreakable and Irreplaceable.
Yeah. Going to have a live workshop. It's going to be great.
Yeah. Tell me what you think the biggest takeaway for people will be after that event.
The biggest takeaway, I think, is, well, empowerment. I think this is like disempowerment trauma, right? Everything that you know to be you is being questioned, it's being compromised. I think the fact that you're going to have so many people in the same room with the same story because they've all been around somebody who's gone to the same university, as you said earlier, that connection and that support is going to be it's just immensely powerful. And there's going to just be this restorative, power element to that. People are going to walk away feeling really, really changed and supported in a way where they're going to reality test in a way that they haven't before, because their reality's been questioned so much. Now they're going to have an opportunity to really come to terms with this intentional abuse and see it for what it is in a very clear way. And it's going to be very liberating for them.
Yeah. I see people all the time get that clarity, and I swear you can't turn back. There's a point where it lands, you have your moment, and you can't turn back. So I know that that's something that people will get from this.
Just real quick, what I hear most people say when they get to that clarity is, now I want to go and help. I want to scream it from the rooftops. I want to get into the helping profession in some way. I want to, coach people, because it's almost like that is an invaluable gift to gain back in your life. And you just can't help but share it. And it's such a beautiful thing to see everybody come together and then want to pay it forward. I love that.
Yeah. I guess I'm living proof of that in some ways myself. But
me too.
yeah. Thank you so much for being here on Real Talk with Lisa Sonni. I really appreciate your insight and this conversation. So for those that want to learn more about you, you can follow at Dr. Peter Salerno on Instagram and on YouTube, and check out his books. And I'll make sure that they're all linked in the notes as well. So please check that out, give him a follow. And if you can, please do come to our online group coaching program, or come meet us in Dana Point in October. We're really excited. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Lisa.